Stay tuned for a live debate between the two people who want to be the Democratic candidate for governor of Virginia, Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam and former Congressman Tom Perriello. It's next right here on your public media station.
Live from the WHRO studios in Norfolk, this is the Virginia Gubernatorial Democratic Primary Debate. Sponsored by the Democratic Business Alliance of Southampton Roads and the Greater Hampton Roads Black Democrats. Join the live conversation on our social channels at #VADemDebate. And now, here is tonight's moderator and WHRV's Hearsay host, Kathy Lewis.
Good evening and welcome to this live debate. We're going to have a terrific evening tonight. We are coming to you live from the studios of WHRO TV in Norfolk. We are broadcasting statewide across Virginia's public media stations and streaming online. Virginians go to the polls June 13th to choose the major party statewide candidates who will face each other this coming November. Both Republicans and Democrats will head to the polls to pick their candidates. And for the next hour, we'll meet the two men trying to become the Democratic Party's gubernatorial candidate. But first, let me thank the sponsors, the Democratic Business Alliance of Southampton Roads and the Greater Hampton Roads Black Democrats. Thank you so much for your help with tonight's broadcast. We do have a studio audience here tonight, and they have been asked sincerely not to applaud or to make noise during the debate, except at the very end of the broadcast and right now when we introduce Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam and former Congressman Tom Perriello. Well done on taking your cues, audience. That was amazing. Each candidate will be making 2 minutes of introductory remarks, and we actually did not have to go to the polls to decide who will go first in tonight's debate. We settled that crucial question backstage with the time-honored toss of a coin. Tom Perriello won the toss, and he has elected to go first. Congressman, welcome. Would you please begin your opening remarks?
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you to all of you for being part of this broadcast tonight. There's so many important issues I know we all want to discuss, from how we strengthen our education system to how we reform our criminal justice system here in this region and across the state. But unfortunately, we face a very serious moment here in the Commonwealth and across the country. President Trump in recent weeks has demonstrated a willingness to obstruct justice and a reckless willingness to share intelligence with some of those who are not exactly our allies across the world. As someone who's worked in and out of the national security sector as a diplomat and as a conflict analyst, I can tell you these are incredibly serious charges. It's incredibly important that we see leaders in Washington start to proceed with impeachment and special prosecutor proceedings. This is a matter of our national security, and it's a matter of our constitutional principles. And we've seen far too few Republicans willing to put country ahead of partisanship, including our likely nominee on the Republican side, Ed Gillespie, who's been silent on these very serious charges. This is a time where we need serious leaders and serious leadership. And in this campaign, we've tried to do two things. One, to be clear about how we will resist the kind of agenda from Donald Trump that is trying to divide us, but also how we can put forward a positive vision that brings together people from across Virginia and moves away from these divisions along region and racial lines. But the only way we can do that is to recognize that we have new threats out there. We have leaders trying to divide us on race, as we've seen in my hometown of Charlottesville with white supremacists who gathered this weekend, and we needed to call out in person. We also see it with the fact that the middle class has been falling further and further behind. And over the next 15 years, we could see a third to a half of all jobs in Virginia disrupted by automation. We have put forward the most ambitious new plan for rejuvenating the middle class here in Virginia, because we believe the best way to resist Donald Trump is to resist the issues that got him in there in the first place, by ensuring the American dream that leaves no region or race in Virginia behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam, would you give us your opening statement?
Good evening, and thank you to the sponsors and to the moderators of tonight's debate. I'm pleased to have my wife Pam with us tonight. My name is Ralph Northam, and as I travel around the Commonwealth and listen to folks and talk about my experience and record over my 10 years of public service, people often ask, what is the difference between you and your opponent? First of all, I have won difficult races in Virginia. First running in the 6th District for the Senate against an 8-year incumbent, and then statewide in 13. I actually received more votes than any other statewide candidate in an off-season election in the history of Virginia. I've never been afraid of standing up to big businesses and PACs, starting with the NRA. I have a D rating. I'm the only candidate running for governor this year that has never had an A rating from the NRA. I have always fought for responsible gun ownership. I've stood up to the tobacco industry, banning smoking in restaurants. And I've stood up to big oil and gas, being the first statewide candidate and representative to be outspoken against offshore drilling, fracking, and uranium mining. I led the fight here in Hampton Roads against sea level rise. I have been pleased to work with Terry McAuliffe with the new Virginia economy. We have brought in over 190,000 new jobs to the Commonwealth. Our unemployment rate has gone from 5.4 to 3.8, the lowest that it's been in 9 years. We've done that through workforce development and inclusivity. I led the fight against the attacks on women's reproductive health care. I stood with Mark Herring to make sure that we had marriage equality here in Virginia. And I've stood up against the affordable health care, making sure that we promote or try to promote Medicaid expansion. No Virginia family should be one illness away from financial demise. I'm pleased to have the support of Governor McAuliffe, Tim Kaine, Mark Warner, Virginia's state Democratic senators and delegates, and I look forward tonight to sharing my ideas for moving Virginia forward with you. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Northam. I appreciate it. The rules for tonight's debate have been agreed upon by the candidates' teams, and we're doing very well so far. The questions will be presented alternately to each candidate, and the candidate who receives the question will have 90 seconds to respond. The other candidate will have 60 seconds to respond to that answer. The panelist who asked the question has the option, which we hope not to have to use, to just jump in if a candidate needs a friendly reminder to stay on the subject, but again, we hope not to have to do that. As you note, we will be keeping a very close watch on time tonight, and you will hear a bell, well done, when the candidate has reached his allotted time. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce my colleagues, tonight's panelists. Brian Colligan is a member of the editorial team at the Virginian Pilot, and Leonard Colvin is the chief reporter for Norfolk's New Journal and Guide. Thank you both so much for being here. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Our first question is for you, Congressman Perriello, and it has to do with health care. I think both of you in your campaigns have pretty clearly stated your belief that health care is a right. But I hope that we could drill down a little more specifically on that. I wonder, to what specific type of health care do you believe that Virginians are entitled?
Well, you know, I'm very proud to have been a supporter of the Affordable Care Act when I was in Congress. A lot of people think it cost me my seat, but I know it got a lot of people coverage. And we really should have universal coverage and affordable coverage here. One of the greatest accomplishments in the Affordable Care Act was to expand what's called the Essential Benefits Package. And what that is saying that health insurance companies can no longer deny coverage for mental health coverage. They could no longer deny coverage for pre- and postnatal care. They could no longer deny coverage for addiction services and other essential benefits. And that's what Donald Trump and the Republicans in Washington have been attacking in this latest bill. It would set us back a decade in terms of the kind of guarantees we fought hard to get for patients and citizens across Virginia. We have been clear that we will support no waivers in Virginia if this bill goes through the Senate to ensure that we do not move backwards but forwards. Unfortunately, Ed Gillespie has said that he would put his insurance company clients ahead of the citizens of Virginia and would pursue those waivers that would take us back to the days where being a woman could be considered a pre-existing condition in our healthcare system. We must move to expand, certainly starting with the Medicaid expansion that would change the lives of 400,000 Virginians. But it wouldn't just provide desperately needed care for the working poor. It would actually help reduce the premiums for the middle class, because the cost of the uninsured is passed on to those of us with private insurance. So we will stand against the legislators in Richmond who want to increase costs for the middle class just to stick it to the working poor.
Thank you so much. Lieutenant Governor Northam, your response.
Well, as most people know, I have worked at the Children's Hospital of King's Daughters right here in Norfolk for over 25 years. I've taken care of a lot of children and their families, and no family should ever have to make the decision whether they go in and see a doctor or stay home and pay their bills. So it is very, very important that all Virginians have access to affordable and quality health care. I want to tell you as a doctor that there are good things about the Affordable Care Act. No more pre-existing conditions, being able to keep our children on our policy till they're 26, access to women's reproductive health care, access to mental health care, and access to preventive care. I have fought hard in Virginia with Terry McAuliffe and Mark Herring and a lot of great legislators to expand Medicaid. There are up to 400,000 working, and I would underline the word working, Virginians that don't have access to health care. That's morally wrong. Also, every day that we don't expand Medicaid in Virginia, we're not only leaving on the table, but we're giving to surrounding states who we compete with over $5 million a day. There are no more excuses. Virginia needs to take care of our own, and we need to expand Medicaid, and I will continue to lead that fight.
Thank you so much. Our next question comes from Leonard Colvin from the New Journal and Guide, and it will be directed to you, Lieutenant Governor Northam.
Good evening, Lieutenant Governor.
Good evening, Leonard.
There have been opposing torch marches in Charlottesville over the Confederate monument issue. If elected, what would you do to resolve that?
You know, Leonard, it's a great question, and you know, we have stood up in Richmond during my 10 years of public service, and even before I was even in public service, to really treat people fairly, with equality. And you know, one of the things that is so important to Virginia is that we live in a diverse society. Just to look around us, that means that we need to be inclusive. We need to welcome people to the Commonwealth of Virginia. Our lights need to be on, our doors open. Nobody should ever live in fear in Virginia. And when we see things like these marches that we just saw in Charlottesville, that is unacceptable. And we need to stand up as a society and say, we're not going to accept this. So the things that are divisive, that are discriminating to people across the Commonwealth, we've got to stop. You know, I think the other thing that we need to think about, Leonard, is why do people get to this point? You know, I see a lot of children in my clinic. They don't have the hatred and the bigotry that we often see in today's society. So one of the things that I have always advocated for is early childhood education. Children are so impressionable.
Well, what would you do legislatively to sort of give locales some instruction on what they should be doing with these monuments?
You know, I think that's something.
To the state
sure.
history.
I mean, we could do things like set up a commission, Leonard, that would study ways that we could better deal with these situations and give localities more power. And they actually have the say. I mean, in Charlottesville, as you know, they've made the decision to remove the statue. That's a local decision, and I certainly support that. We've done things like taking the Confederate flag off of license plates. Things that we can do at the state level, we'll continue to do. But again, we need to welcome people to Virginia and make them feel comfortable.
Congressman Perriello, your response, please.
So people wonder why I got into a social media fight with the white supremacists that organized that rally. It's important to stand up to hate and call it exactly what it is, which is a white supremacist neo-Nazi rally here in Virginia, and it is not consistent with Virginia values. And I think it's incumbent on those of us who have privilege, including because of our own races, to be part of standing up for that and not just expecting communities of color to carry the burden of doing so. That's why I called for a commission on racial healing and transformation in the wake of this, including how we memorialize such events. I've worked actually more of my time as a peace negotiator than as a politician. And one of the things I've learned working on truth and reconciliation commissions across Africa, looking at efforts in Afghanistan and elsewhere, is that we don't deal with these things by acting like the problem isn't there. We have to call out racism, structural and overt, where we see it, and we have to continue to address the issues of deep racial inequality we have here in Virginia, where the median net worth of an African-American family remains 1/11 that of a median white family in Virginia. We must deal with the structural barriers and have these conversations even when they're uncomfortable.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Brian Colligan from the Virginian Pilot.
Congressman, earlier this year, the General Assembly approved a significant mental health reform package that expands the core services provided by Community Services Board, excuse me. Absent was the funding, however, and these requirements, such as same-day mental health screening services, outpatient primary care screening and monitoring, for instance, will be costly. How do you think Virginia should best provide for the mental health care needs of its citizens, and most importantly, how do we pay for it?
Well, thank you. The mental health crisis is something that affects every community, every class, and every race. We took a step forward with the Affordable Care Act when I voted for it because we ensured mental health parity. But that doesn't cover those who aren't getting covered at all because our legislature continues to block the Medicaid expansion that would affect so many of the working poor. So we need to make sure there's more coverage. We need to make sure more people are moving into these professions, which is why we have a debt forgiveness program for students who would move into desperately needed work in both addiction services and mental health services. And we need to make sure that we're dealing with the stigma associated with getting care, which is one of the first things I hear from first responders across these needs. Our community health centers have been crucial to this, and we were able to get major investments in our community health centers through the Stimulus Act and other efforts when I was in Congress. And we actually found that telemedicine can be an incredibly effective part of the mental health services that need to be provided. But we are the only candidate in this race who has shown where we're going to raise the revenue to do every single thing that we have proposed in this race, from universal pre-K to 2 years of community college to filling gaps on mental health and addiction needs. We have to be willing to close tax loopholes and ask those making $1 million or more to pay a little bit more to invest in the workforce development and the transportation needs that are holding back growth, particularly the middle class here in Virginia. So we need to be willing to put revenue on the table to make a difference. We need to make sure insurance coverage is there, and we need to make sure those insurance companies don't have a choice but to include mental health parity coverage in their efforts.
Thank you so much. Lieutenant Governor Ralph.
Mental illness is a serious problem here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That was highlighted during the Virginia Tech tragedy 10 years ago. It was also recently highlighted when Senator Creed Deed's son took his life. As a result of that, a mental health task group was set up here in Virginia. I have chaired that. We've looked at several different areas. The first is crisis intervention. How do we deal with someone that's acutely mentally ill? And we've made progress, especially with things like the bed registry. We then looked at ongoing therapy. How do we make sure that we have enough social workers, psychiatrists, and psychologists? We then looked at law enforcement. Far too many of our mentally ill are in our jails and penitentiaries. And finally, something that Tom mentioned is telepsychiatry and telehealth. That's a very exciting avenue that we're now able to reach underserved areas. How do we pay for it? I'll tell you in 2 words. It's called Medicaid expansion. We have not only given away to our surrounding states who we compete with over $10 billion with a B dollars. So there are no more excuses. We need to bring that revenue back to the Commonwealth of Virginia and use it for things like the treatment of mental illness.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor Northam, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is one of 2 pipelines that's been proposed in the Commonwealth. The Atlantic Coast one is about delivering natural gas to communities across the Commonwealth. This pathway, as you know, has some landowners and environmentalists concerned about the potential impact on waterways and aquifers. I wonder if you would please explain whether you believe the construction of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is in Virginia's best interest.
Thank you, Kathy, for that question. And there are many concerns across the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I have listened to many of them, such as property rights, something that we need to be very cognizant of, and also environmental issues. We need to be environmentally responsible. We have to look at the different agencies that are available to deal with the pipeline and the regulations. In Virginia, we have the DEQ. I have worked with the DEQ. I wrote them a letter suggesting and asking them to change from a blanket permitting system to a site-specific permit. They have taken that into account and are going to move forward with that. That means that anywhere there's a stream or a river, that there will be a site-specific permit, and that we will use science and transparency if the pipeline moves forward. I think people need to also look at my record. I have fought against offshore drilling. I have fought against fracking in Virginia, as well as uranium mining. I've led the charge on sea level rise. We need to make sure that we wean ourselves away from fossil fuels and concentrate on alternative sources of energy, such as sun and wind, and we have made a lot of progress this past year. Today was an exciting day, and I don't know if anybody saw the announcement that Governor Terry McAuliffe and I made, but what we're advocating for is that by the year 2030, 30% of our energy production in the Commonwealth of Virginia will be from renewable energy. That's a great way to wean ourselves away from fossil fuels, decrease the amount of carbon that we're putting into the air, and make Virginia a safer place environmentally.
Thank you so much. Congressman Perriello.
You don't lead the fight against sea level rise by making a $6 billion 50-year investment in fossil fuel infrastructure. Right now, our utilities want to raise our rates to be able to invest $6.7 billion into fracked gas pipelines that they haven't even proved are necessary. That is not where the jobs and the businesses are growing over the next generation. This is like someone coming to you right when digital cameras were taking off and saying you should bet your pension fund on Eastman Kodak. This is not where growth is right now. It is going to move Virginia backwards because of the relationship between the utilities and the legislatures, both parties in the legislatures, whose biggest funder is Dominion Power. We have dropped behind North Carolina on solar energy jobs, and we're at real risk of falling behind Maryland on wind energy jobs. We will get to offshore wind, but because we haven't been leading on this, it's going to be Maryland companies manufacturing it and Maryland companies selling it to us. We need leadership now that is willing, as I have been, to take not $1 from the electric utilities and not make a bet on 50 years moving in the wrong direction. Virginia is a leader, not a follower, and this is the way to do it.
Thank you so much. Our next question from Leonard Colvin from the New Journal and Guide.
The Trump administration is leading towards a lot of public and private partnerships to fulfill its infrastructure development pledge. If you're looking at a good example or a bad example, look at the tolls imposed on commuters traveling between Norfolk and Portsmouth, which was a public, private partnership. And a lot of people got hurt. How would you resolve this situation? What legislation would you pass to make sure that this particular problem, which irritates a lot of people in both cities, from happening again?
Yeah. Congressman Perriello.
So the Portsmouth Tunnel is a great example of where you don't have leadership with the moral courage to say what's necessary, which is if you paid $2.3 billion up front for the tunnel, we wouldn't be paying $23 billion for it now. The tunnels there and the tolls have crushed small businesses across Portsmouth. People are no longer crossing over for nightlife or other activities. Meanwhile, the working poor that need to cross in the other direction, that $10 is a crushing debt. When you're talking about people on minimum wage only making $14,000 a year because we haven't raised the minimum wage in Virginia and we've fallen behind West Virginia. We pay poverty wages and then we send people across where that adds up to real money. Then you lose your Easy Pass for a day. Next thing you know, your tolls are your debt is going through the roof. Then you get your license suspended. Then you're talking about driving with a suspended license, and welcome to the criminal justice system, where we have overcrowded prisons and we've seen tragic results of those who are held within. We have a system that essentially criminalizes being poor. In these sorts of moments where we have a go-along-to-get-along legislature that doesn't make the tough decisions of raising the revenue necessary to make the investments in education and infrastructure we need, the losers are always the middle class and the working class. We've tried to learn from these public-private partnerships and some of the toll roads up in Northern Virginia. But at the end of the day, what we need is for our public officials to do their job and make the tough decisions that make the investments that grow the working middle class.
What was what particular legislation would you propose to make sure that these public and private investment efforts don't hurt people? Because a lot of times it's just the businessman getting their money back by charging tolls.
Yeah.
Once the government has put up a lot of money.
For me, it's pretty simple. The returns when it's a public investment instead of a public-private investment have been better for taxpayers. It's just been that legislators haven't been able to raise the revenue. We need to do this as a permanent increase in infrastructure spending, and we can ask people making $1 million a year or more to pay a little bit more so that we can invest in those bridges and tunnels. And you know who wins? Everybody, including people making $1 million a year or more.
Thank you.
Leonard,
Governor
to
Northam.
your point, I work in Norfolk. I own a business, and we employ about 250 people. And one of the things that people in Suffolk and Portsmouth have said, Ralph, you have got to do something about these tolls. And we have looked at ways of defraying. But I will tell you that Elizabeth River Crossing has been one of the worst deals that was ever authored and signed by the Commonwealth of Virginia, as was 460, a project that never came to fruition but cost Virginians millions of dollars. I'll tell you how you make a change. You make a change with leadership. And I want to give Aubrey Lane, who is our Secretary of Transportation, credit. He gets how to do public-private relationships. And if you look at some of the projects that are going on right here in Hampton Roads, like expanding 64, we're going to expand the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. We've expanded, or are expanding I-66 up in Northern Virginia. Public-private partnerships are important, but you have to do them right, and it's all about leadership, and it's having people at the table that understand business and understand how to negotiate and do what's in the best interest of Virginia taxpayers.
Thank you so much. Our next question is from Brian Colligan from the Virginian Pilot.
Lieutenant Governor, I know you both have touched on this briefly, but being that we are in Hampton Roads, I feel it's important to ask that the new administration in the White House has wasted little time in dismantling the environmental record of the previous administration, including an executive order to try and take part the Clean Power Plan and considering withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord. That could obviously have profound implications for Hampton Roads, where sea level rise is an existential threat to homes and businesses here. As Washington steps back from its leadership role on this issue, what must the next Virginia governor do to ensure this region will have the resources and support it needs?
Well, it's a great question, and I appreciate it. And, you know, there is nothing more important than having a leader that is willing to stand up against what's going on in Washington right now, because it is very, very concerning. And I would be the first to step up and say our current president is dangerous, not only for this country, but the Commonwealth of Virginia. And just as you said, he has threatened to take all of the funding away that we have used to restore the health of the Chesapeake Bay, which a healthy Chesapeake Bay is worth billions of dollars to our economy in Virginia. He's changing the health care system, threatening to take health coverage away from millions of Americans across the Commonwealth. That will affect the Commonwealth of Virginia. He's taken away money for HUD, which is affordable housing.
Again,
so
back to
yes.
sea level rise, though. That's,
Yes.
that's what I want to talk about.
Yes, I was going to get to sea level rise, and you know I have a lot of experience in that. And if you know of my history, I grew up on the Eastern Shore. I know all too well what sea level rise is doing to the Commonwealth of Virginia. And if you don't think it's affecting, let's go to Tangier Island, which is sinking into the Chesapeake Bay. So when I was in the Senate, I actually introduced legislation to start a study for sea level rise that would then allow us to obtain grants, federal grants. That was successful. We now have federal grants, and so now we have the money to do what we call a resiliency plan for Hampton Roads. It's not only good for the quality of life, property owners, but also for national security. So it's important that we have that money, and you know what? We can use that money and actually improve our economy. It can be an economic driver if we prepare Hampton Roads for sea level rise, and that's what I plan to do over the next 4 years.
Thank you. Congressman Perriello.
Well, I don't say this often, but we can't blame President Trump for everything. We have seen in the legislature here in Richmond, Virginia fall behind because we haven't been willing to do basic steps like a renewable energy standard or a cap on carbon. And the fact of the matter is, in places like North Carolina, these have created more jobs and more businesses. There are more Americans working today in fossil fuel, in clean energy than in the fossil fuel industry. In fact, there are already more Virginians working in solar power than in coal. These are the jobs that are going to be growing over the next 10 years. And what's been a driver for them has been states that are willing to step up and create incentives to push in the direction of clean energy. The impact, of course, is on our coastlines. And there is no area, there are only two that rank, New Orleans and here, at the absolute top of the list of those most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. Of course, disproportionately affecting minority communities in the area with enormous impacts on our naval bases as well. Virginia needs to do its part by putting the rules in place that can unleash the clean energy jobs of the future.
Thank you so much. Congressman Perriello, I want to note that we have just passed the 10th anniversary of the massacre at Virginia Tech, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about gun policy. And I wonder what you see as common sense gun policy that you could also persuade the General Assembly to adopt.
Well, I fought very hard for universal background checks when President Obama chose to pick up that fight. It's the only way we can guarantee the most common sense thing imaginable, which is it's the only way we can know that someone with a violent criminal history, with a history of domestic violence or mental health problems, or someone on the terrorist watch list is unable to buy a weapon of mass destruction or any weapon. This, in Virginia, we cannot do unless we have a universal background check. I was part of the fight to get that through the Senate, helped raise money to do a study to show the causal link between stronger gun laws and lower gun deaths. I've got an F now from the NRA. I've called them, in a less diplomatic moment, a nutjob extremist organization. But I think part of what's incumbent now is for responsible gun owners, and I know so many, to be part of distancing themselves from an organization that no longer represents their interests or their causes. We can defend a Second Amendment right to bear arms in our heritage with common sense gun reform, ranging from universal background checks to limits on high-capacity magazines and one-gun-a-month policies. These used to be things where people could come together and find common sense to make sure we protect our rights, but we also protect our communities. But unfortunately, like so many things in our politics today in Virginia and in Washington, we've seen the extremes take over. I believe this is a time we need to bring those voices together. As someone who was born and raised in Charlottesville and represented Southside Virginia and has lived the last 6 years in Northern Virginia, I believe there is a lot that brings us together. And one of those things is wanting our communities to be safe. I believe these are the kind of common sense reforms that are long past due in Richmond.
Thank you so much. Lieutenant Governor Northam.
Well, let me remind the viewers that I'm the only person running for governor this year that has never had an A rating from the NRA. The reason for that is because I've stood up to the NRA, have never taken money from them, and let me tell you why. I have a unique perspective on guns. I grew up on the Eastern Shore, but then I went and served in the United States Army taking care of wounded soldiers during Desert Storm. I know what assault weapons do to human beings. I've also taken care of toddlers who have picked up loaded firearms on the bedside table. I've taken care of women who have been in tragedies because of domestic violence. We need to have a conversation about gun violence in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I'm willing to lead that. We need to talk about universal background checks. We need to talk about bans against assault weapons. We need to talk about bringing back one gun a month. Nobody should need to buy more than one gun a month. And we need to have smart gun technology that only one's fingerprint will discharge that gun. I'm willing to sit down with people on both sides of the aisle, bring them together, and let's find something that we can agree on, that being responsible gun ownership, and then we can make some common sense movements to make our Commonwealth safer regarding the gun violence that we're all experiencing.
Thank you so much. Our next question is from Leonard Colvin from the New Journal and Guide.
Politicians, specifically Mr. Trump, who probably won the White House by bringing forth this issue, always talking about the plight of white working class Americans. There are counterparts in the African American, gay, and Hispanic communities. What do you have to say to them to raise their optimism about the future?
And this is for you, Lieutenant Governor Northam.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we need to level the playing field. And there's still cronyism here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. When people put in applications for jobs, and I know some people are sitting in the audience tonight that understand that as well. So, I mentioned earlier, and we're proud that our unemployment rate in Virginia has gone from 5.4 to 3.8%. But I can tell you, if you go to the Eastern Shore where I'm from, the South Side or the southwest of Virginia, it's nowhere near 3.8%. So how do we lift up all of Virginia? And there's some things that we can do. First of all, in rural Virginia, we still have pockets where they don't have access to broadband. That should be unacceptable in 2017. We have areas that don't have access to cell coverage. We have an opioid crisis going on, which is one of our largest challenges in Virginia that we need to address. But how do we lift up everybody? We need to know that what the jobs of the 21st century are, and they're in STEAM-related areas: science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. So we need to prepare the workforce for those 21st century jobs. We've done that through things like affordable higher education. My G3 program, Get Skilled, Get a Job, and Give Back, which helps people go through community colleges without having any expenses. We've really emphasized vocational and technical training at the high school level. And finally, we just need to make sure that everybody in Virginia has access to the American dream, and that is access to the education that will allow them to be in the workforce for our 21st century jobs.
Thank you so much. Congressman Perriello.
Growing up in Charlottesville, I was very aware that Virginia is the birthplace of American democracy, but it's also the birthplace of American slavery. We've always been both at the forefront of justice, liberty, and equality for all, but we've also been a source of some of the greatest sins and the greatest sins in our country's past and our Commonwealth's past. In each generation, we make a decision about whether our generation in Virginia is going to be defined as being at the forefront of democracy or the forefront of those darker traditions. We must take them head on and address the fact that we continue to have massive structural racial inequality here in this state. As I mentioned earlier, we put out a paper on the racial wealth gap. We've looked at it both in terms of access to capital, access to housing, as well as a continued criminal justice system that continues to make this effectively a new Jim Crow state here in Virginia, despite great efforts by Governor McAuliffe to begin the efforts of justice reform, including moving us out of being the highest level of juvenile incarceration in the state. We can be that promise of justice, liberty, and equality for all, but we can't do it by closing our ears and closing our eyes to the fact that these inequalities still exist. We do it by answering them and coming up with solutions to address them.
Thank you so much. Our next question from Brian Colligan from the Virginian Pilot.
This is for the Congressman. 4 years ago, Terry McAuliffe pledged to be a brick wall when it came to attempts to limit access to women's reproductive health care and including access to abortion. You've said that the vote you regret most in Congress was that for the Stupak Amendment. Some Democrats have suggested there should be a litmus test on this issue for candidates seeking their party's nomination. Please explain your view on this issue, including how you would handle the type of abortion restrictions that have been passed by a Republican General Assembly.
Well, I want to, first of all, commend Governor McAuliffe and Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam for their leadership on the issue of protecting a woman's right to choose, and to all those organizations and advocates across the state who've ensured that when we've seen over 70 different pieces of legislation in the General Assembly just since 2010 alone to limit either a woman's right to choose or the meaningful and dignified access of that choice. I've supported Roe v. Wade my entire life, and I believe we must pursue a constitutional amendment here in Virginia in the chance that after Justice Gorsuch, we get one more justice on the Supreme Court that could challenge Roe. The Stupak Amendment was an attempt for me to meet a pledge I had made to my constituents to ensure no taxpayer funding for abortion in the health care bill. I was very proud to support the health care bill, and I've expressed many times my regret, both about the pledge and the vote, to support that amendment. I believe we must continue to fight, as I am trying to do in this race and in my nonprofit advocacy, to ensure a woman's right to choose and meaningful access in a state that continues to see 92% of our counties have no providers, and people often having to take 2 days out of work in order to go, receive a lecture, go through a 24-hour waiting period before making a choice that is their sovereign right to do. And I believe we must continue to be a brick wall against these regressive attacks from the legislature, but also find ways for common ground on expanding universal access to contraception, which we helped to move forward in the Affordable Care Act, and making sure that we do not see attacks on these clinics, whether from the outside or from within. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, this is a difference between myself and my opponent, and I would like to commend Governor McAuliffe. He just vetoed the 111th piece of legislation that, if not for him, we would be like other states like North Carolina. There is an ongoing battle and fight, and don't make any mistake about it. There are continued attacks on women's access to reproductive health care. I have watched things like the infamous transvaginal ultrasound bill, the trap laws that were intended to shut down our women's health clinics, the 20-week abortion ban, and the personhood bill, which, by the way, would make in vitro fertilization right here in the Norfolk, Virginia, unlawful. I have been steady, unwavering in my support for women's access to reproductive health care. That's why I'm proud to have the endorsement of NARAL. I have unequivocally been pro-choice. We don't need someone who's multiple choice. We don't need to be asking questions, what box is someone going to check? I will tell women across and men across the Commonwealth of Virginia that I will continue to stand up for the attacks against women's reproductive health care.
Thank you so much. Lieutenant Governor Northam, a particular issue for Hampton Roads is economic diversification. We are a region that is heavily dependent on the federal sector, and there have been great efforts over the years to diversify the economy. At the moment, of course, the Trump administration suggests that there is going to be a big defense buildup, and still economists are saying, don't count on that for this region. We must diversify. I wonder, from the pulpit of the governor's office, what the governor can do about economic diversification in a region like Hampton Roads.
Kathy, it is a great question, and you know, if you look at the economy in Hampton Roads, it's flat compared to other parts of Virginia, and so we have always been dependent on the military and government contracting in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but because of things like sequestration, because of the government shutdown, which hurt our economy significantly, we've had to, with some urgency, diversify our economy. So the jobs of the 21st century are important not only to Hampton Roads, but all of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And as I said earlier, those are high-tech areas, things like cybersecurity. We're very well poised, positioned rather, here in Virginia with our military here in Hampton Roads and the Pentagon up in Northern Virginia. Things like unmanned aerial systems. There are a lot of drones in the air that people don't even know about, and we've promoted that in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Biotechnology, and there's some great companies that are starting and growing here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, ways that we can diversify their economy. And then things like the ability to collect data and analyze the data. These are all 21st century jobs. So as I said earlier, we need to know that those are the jobs of the 21st century. And then how do we prepare and how do we help businesses start right here in Hampton Roads, again, so that we can bring our economy up. One last thing I would say, the Port of Virginia is very important. We just made a major investment in our port. It's doing well. It's bringing in money to our coffers in Virginia. So we need to continue with infrastructure, transportation, and support of our port right here in Hampton Roads.
Thank you. Congressman Perriello, how would you diversify the economy here?
So first, I think it's really important to point out how bad the federal cuts would be and the silence, again, that we have seen from Ed Gillespie of putting Virginia second after his ideological and partisan positions, whether it was cuts to the Bay funding or whether it's been the threat of cuts within the budget that affects so many Virginia workers. And they can talk about the defense buildup, which has some merit, but if that's combined with massive cuts in diplomacy and development and other contracting areas, it'll be disastrous for Virginia. So we're still waiting to see the Republican leadership putting our state and our jobs ahead of their fear of Donald Trump and his presidency. In addition to that, we do need to diversify for the jobs of the future. That's why we've proposed moving from a K through 12 education system to a P through 14 education system that includes a universal pre-K year and at least 2 years of trade school, apprenticeship program, or community college. Because the fact of the matter is, we could see half of all jobs in Virginia automated over the coming 15 years. People are going to be on a revolving door of workforce development. It's not going to be like last generation, where you get 1 degree once and coast on that for a while. So we need to be overhauling the education system to connect to a very new and hopefully diversified economy.
Thank you so much. Our next question from Leonard Colvin from the New Journal and Guide.
Yeah, I'm going to throw this out to both of you, and starting with you, Mr. Perriello. During the bad old days of the drug epidemic, crack cocaine was criminalized. Now that they have this new wave of opioid addiction, which is affecting mostly white and suburban people, it's being treated as a mental illness, a social disease. And Attorney General Sessions has said that he's going to step up or revamp the lock 'em up tendency towards people who violate the nation's narcotics laws. Many governors have options to perhaps fight against that. What would you do if you were elected? I'm not going back to the days of locking them up, particularly poor African American and Hispanic people. And now white people, since many of them will be arrested for opioid addiction cases.
So, Leonard, first, you have to call it what it is, and we have multiple times called out Attorney General Sessions for this racist dog whistling politics of trying to go back to the failed politics of both racial dog whistling, but also something we can't afford, which is to continue to over-criminalize and over-incarcerate. I was proud when I was in Congress that we got rid of some of the disparities, including the crack cocaine disparities, that had a long racial history. We've proposed decriminalizing low-level marijuana possession, as well as the ability to use medical marijuana. It is true that it's a shame that we have a new political coalition for this only now that it's affecting whiter and more rural communities. But that is still an opportunity that we shouldn't lose to build a bipartisan coalition to move away from these failed policies of the 1990s. I find in my many trips to southwestern Virginia and Southside Virginia that I used to represent that the people are way ahead of their own legislators. We should not assume that these very conservative legislators in Richmond are actually representing their communities. They're representing very right-wing donors who send them there to be ideologically pure. When I go to communities across Virginia, they believe in second chances, they believe in love of neighbor, and they believe that it is far more efficient to invest a little bit up front in prevention, including trade schools and apprenticeship programs, including instead of the huge cost of incarceration. We have a school-to-prison pipeline where we see suspension rates going through the roof, even in the first, second, and third grade level, disproportionately for students of color. We need to create a school-to-workforce pipeline. We believe our plan does that.
Thank you.
Well, I agree, Tom, that we need to interrupt the school to prison pipeline. It is a significant problem. Just a couple quick numbers. Virginia right now spends $67 million a year on marijuana laws. And one of the things that I have advocated for is to decriminalize marijuana. And people should also know that people of color, Leonard, are 2.8 times more likely to be picked up for smoking marijuana than are those not of color. And we need to level the playing field. You mentioned the opioid crisis. That is one of our largest challenges in Virginia right now, and I would say that it does not discriminate. There are people from all walks of life, people that you would least expect. Last year we lost 806 Virginians to opioid overdose. This year we have lost over 1,000. One of the things that we can do is look at the decriminalization of marijuana and then look at medicinal uses for it. As a doctor, over 100 medicines I use come from plants. So let's not only think outside the box, but step outside the box and look for other uses for marijuana and stop putting so many people in jail.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Brian Colligan has our next question. And this is for Lieutenant Governor Northam.
Absolutely. This is race is for the Democratic primary nomination, but let's do a quick preview of what we'll hear in November, because it's either going to be tax and spend Ralph or tax and spend Tom. You know what you're going to hear. What would you say about two people concerned about the cost of government, and how do you think Virginia should equitably pay for its needs?
Yes, well, I have been in the legislature for 10 years now, 6 years as a senator and 4 years as lieutenant governor. And I think it's reasonable to have great ideas and what we want to do to move Virginia forward. But the first question that should be asked is, how are we going to pay for it? And so I do have some plans on the table, such as pre-K education. And we talked about that a little bit. We have to be realistic when we present plans to the General Assembly and know that we're going to be able to bring people from both sides of the aisle. We may agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, we need to do what's in the best interest of Virginia. So let me give you pre-K education as an example. I chair the Commonwealth Caucus for Childhood Success. We have worked to make sure that all children in the Commonwealth of Virginia have access to pre-K. I applied for a grant with some help from other folks in Richmond of $70 million. We received that grant, $17 million over each year for 4 years. We used that just this year to jumpstart pre-K in Virginia, and we've opened up 13,000 more slots just this year because of that federal money. As we move forward, there's not only public interest, bipartisan interest, but also interest from the private sector. And so we will move forward to pay for things like pre-K education with the private-public sector. And at the end of the day, we're not going to have to raise taxes to do that. So they can call me tax and spend, but I think those that know me, know my record in Virginia, I haven't been one to step forward and want to raise taxes, because realistically, it's not possible in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Thank you so much.
Well, this is a bit of a difference. I don't think the first question is how do you pay for it. I think the first question is what solves the problem. This is part of what's getting us into this mess where we see the middle class and the working class fall behind. We've got to start with the investments that actually give the middle class a chance to live the American dream and give regions and races that have been left behind real access to that American dream. And I believe, unfortunately, that we will be running against Ed Gillespie, whose trickle-down economic policies are what wrecked this economy and almost took our country into a Great Depression. They have told us for 30 years that the way to create growth is to give huge tax cuts to the richest people and the richest corporations. The only problem with this theory is evidence. They've spent 30 years peddling this to us, but at every single time it hasn't created growth. It's created consolidation at the top. And consolidation at the top actually is an anti-growth strategy. Our tax reform proposal is the only one in this race that pays for everything that we need to create the middle-class American dream here in Virginia again. I believe growth comes from the disposable income of the working and middle class. When people have a little money to spend, we see growth, and that's how we're going to rebuild the middle class here in Virginia.
Thank you. And we are heading to our last question, gentlemen, so here we go. This is for you, Congressman Perriello. The Supreme Court, as you know, set aside the conviction of former Governor Bob McDonnell on public corruption charges, and that continues to inspire a conversation about the behavior of politicians elected to office. I wonder, if elected, what ethical limitations could we expect from you as governor, and what do you think can be done to deter corruption in Richmond?
Well, I've often said that the most ironic thing is that I now have the title of the Honorable because I was a former member of Congress. I think most people consider that a little incongruent. But the reality is people should be appalled by how we finance our elections. They should be appalled at the fact that there are unlimited corporate contributions, including from the very monopolies that the legislature is supposed to be keeping an eye on. They should be appalled at how much time we spend fundraising, instead of spending more time with those who might be facing foreclosure or facing the minimum wage, or those who may have family members caught up in the criminal justice system. I believe good people get into politics for the right reasons. I hope that includes the people on this stage, I think. But I think at the end of the day, it is a system that's broken. I believe in publicly financed elections. If we can't get that, we need severe caps on the amount of money that any individual can give so that politicians get back to working for all of the people and not just a few that can afford it. I believe that the broadcast should have to give spectrum so that we have actual debates like this one tonight, instead of bludgeoning you with 30-second spots that do not exactly elevate the public debate. I believe we need a complete overhaul, and again, Virginia, as the birthplace of American democracy, should be at the forefront. I believe Virginia can be the first state to reach 100% voter participation. This is doable. Oregon is already at 83%, and they do it cheaper than our system. We should be looking for ways to rejuvenate our democracy when people are so cynical about all of the political parties. So since my time in Congress, we fought for the Disclose Act, for the FAIR Act. We'll continue to fight for that in Richmond and continue to shine a light on how we ensure a new generation of democracy here.
Thank you so much. Lieutenant Governor.
You know, I think we also need to address campaign finance reform. It's really gotten out of hand. Virginia, as you all know, is the wild, wild west. There are no limits to what people can give. So I have actually proposed a campaign finance reform plan where candidates don't accept donations, contributions from corporations. I have also put a limit of $10,000 on contributions. You know, I've watched this in healthcare. Back when I started practicing medicine, they were taking doctors to trips all over the continent, and it wasn't right. The perception of it wasn't good. We have evolved through medical ethics to now where I don't even take a pen, a writing pen from a pharmaceutical company. So I think that's important. It's important for the people of Virginia. Everybody should have a voice, not just corporations. And so I have worked with Richmond with ethics reform, and I will continue to lead that discussion as we move forward in Virginia.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. That wraps up the question portion of our evening. And now it is time for those closing statements. Congressman Perriello, let's begin with you.
Virginia has so much going for it. We've had great leadership, we have great infrastructure, but we have real challenges. And I think those are challenges that hit every single corner of the state. We see the existential threat of climate change threatening our coastline and the sea level rise. We see an economy that is leaving too many behind. The average level of student debt here in Virginia is now $35,000, and that's for the kids lucky enough to have gotten on a pathway into a four-year university. We've seen consumer debt go through the roof, and we continue to have a criminal justice system that is decades out of place. We can't afford to continue to change things around the margins. We need a new generation of ideas that understands the threats of tomorrow are not quite the same as the one of yesterday. We are going to see automation challenge jobs up and down the education scale. We see a consolidation where in the 90s during the economic recovery, 70% of new businesses were created in small and medium-sized towns. But in this most recent recovery, it was only 17% in medium-sized towns and 0% in small towns and counties. We're going to have to figure out a way to rejuvenate small business growth by relocalizing some level of energy production, food production, and even manufacturing. We need to be able to figure out how to give people second chances coming out of prison, but more importantly, invest in an education and workforce development system that has fewer people going into the incarceration in the first place. We can do this here in Virginia when we come together and have bold ideas that actually match the challenges of the time. When we have leaders who are willing to say, here's how we can solve this problem, and go out and make the case around the state. We can bring people together. I am absolutely convinced from my time winning a tough race in one of the reddest parts of the state that there is still a lot more that brings us together than that divides us. When we have honest conversations about racial inequality, when we have honest conversations about regions that feel like they've been left behind, we can come together and find the kinds of investments we need in infrastructure in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads and in rural broadband in rural communities. We can figure out how we will treat mental health and addiction as health problems and not as criminal problems. We can do this here in Virginia. I believe on June 13th, we have a chance to take a first step in a very positive direction.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I appreciate it. Lieutenant Governor Northam, your
well,
closing
thank
statement.
you to the audience, and thanks for those that are viewing from afar. You know, one of the things that we learned in 2016 was that these elections have tremendous consequences. And as we travel around Virginia, there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, and it's our job to harness that enthusiasm and bring it to the polls on Election Day so that we don't have to continue what we're seeing in Washington. So Virginia deserves a leader that, number one, knows how to win. Number two, they need to be able to stand up to the recklessness and the hatred that we're seeing in Washington right now. They need to be able to fight for progressive democratic values. They also need to make sure that we have economic opportunity for all Virginians, no matter who you are, no matter where you are. They need to make sure that our children have access to a world-class education, the same opportunities that I had when I was growing up. And families need to have the same tools that Pam and I have had to raise two beautiful children. You know, I have been a pediatrician now for over 25 years. And as you might imagine, I have held a lot of babies and looked into their eyes. And when you look in a baby's eyes, you don't see the hatred and the bigotry that we so often see in our society now. You see love, affection, and joy. So this election to me is about what are those babies going to grow up to be? Are they going to live in neighborhoods and communities that are inclusive, where people welcome each other? Are they going to have access to a world-class education system? Are these babies going to grow up to have access to affordable and quality health care? Are they going to live in safe communities where there are not guns on every street corner? And finally, are they going to live in an environment where the air and the water are clean? That's what this election is about. I hope that all of you will come together. The election is on June the 13th. I would be honored to have your support and your vote. Let's get June 13th. We can do this together, and then we'll move on to the November 7th election. I ask for your support.
Thank you.
I look forward to representing Virginia in the next 4 years. Thank you all so much, and God bless all of you.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Our thanks as well to the Democratic Business Alliance of Southampton Roads, the Greater Hampton Roads Black Democrats, and for great questions to our colleagues Brian Colligan from the Virginian Pilot and Leonard Colvin from the New Journal and Guide. Again, a reminder, the deadline to register to vote is actually Monday, so you want to get on that, and you can find out everything you need to know or get registered to vote or get an absentee ballot at the State Board of Elections website, elections.virginia.gov. And long before we get to November, we have those Democratic and Republican primaries coming up Tuesday, June 13th, and I hope you learned something tonight that will help you cast an informed vote. Thanks so much for joining us on your public media station.